The family that vacations together stays together. At least, that was the plan. Except now, the dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Underrated Movie Podcast. This is a podcast where we discuss films that are underrated, underappreciated, and ones that have flown under the radar and passed most people by, or flown under the border, perhaps, in this situation. I am your host, Derick McDuff, and today I'm going to be discussing Robert Rodriguez's Once Upon a Time in Mexico with my good buddy, Kurosh Jozavi. How's it going, Kurosh?
It's never a bad day when I get to sit here and talk to you about movies that are underrated, and this day just got better. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited. Yeah, I'm excited to have you. I'm sure that everybody listening knows you at this point. You know, you've been on a panel with me. You've done basically every podcast I've ever done. You've guested on at least once, including this one a couple times. But for the few who might not know you out there, what did you want to let the people know about yourself?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for that introduction. That's very flattering, and I am very proud of the numerous podcasts you've had me on.
You've got the belt, man.
Great. Yeah, I wear that belt proudly. But yeah, for outside of being a guest on one of several of Derick's podcast, I do my own show and regarding video games and game development. And so I'm on YouTube and I'm on podcasting services. On YouTube, I usually focus on reviews, spotlights, essays, and various things at Cujo Prime. You can find me at Cujo Prime everywhere. And then you have guested on one of my podcasts in the very first inaugural season for Save Point Stories, which kind of is a brainchild of what I had my YouTube channel be, where the crux of it is I just prompt the guests to talk about games. What is a game that means a lot to you and why? And we just have a conversation either about the game or about the passion behind it. And like I said, yeah, Derick, thank you for being a guest on my show. And I love your episode. That was a lot of fun. We talked about Majora's Mask and everything that means to you, which you shared a lot of things with me that I was like, whoa, I love Majora's Mask. It's one of my favorites as well.
Yeah, nice. Nice. Yeah, for the people listening, he's got a cool Majora's Mask little figurine guy behind him. It's pretty awesome.
I love the Skull Kid. And yeah, so I loved having you on the show. So yeah, Save Point Stories is that podcast, and at Cujo Prime everywhere on YouTube, on all socials. You can find any kind of games coverage. I just got back from PAX and doing a lot of PAX coverage of what was shown there and what I experienced there. I'm deep in Hollow Knight Silksong right now, and I have some stuff from Pokemon Worlds that I was recently at. So exciting stuff. Yeah,
it's awesome stuff. And yeah, thank you so much for letting me up beyond Save Point Stories and talk about my favorite game ever, Majora's Mask. That was an absolute blast. And, you know, letting me be the guest for once was definitely a really good time. Yeah, so I had a blast with that. But yeah, like you said, you've been a guest a bunch of times, you know, and I always love having you on. And usually they'll come to you and they'll say, hey, I need somebody to talk about Twisters with, or I need somebody to talk about whatever with. This time though, I was like, you know what, Kurosh, I want to put the ball in your court. I have my big master list of underrated movies. I want you to zero in and pick something. And you came back to me. You're like, you know what? Let's talk about Once Upon a Time in Mexico. Like I said, this is the Robert Rodriguez film from 2003, starring Antonio Banderas. as well as Johnny Depp and a Selma Hayek, and a number of other. It's kind of an ensemble. This one.
It is. It truly is.
Yeah. Why did you zero in on this one as one to talk about?
Because I really wanted to honor Agent Sand's words of being a Mexican and not a Mexican. No, that movie, I don't know. It has a special place in my heart. Your list, by the way, is fantastic. I'm excited to hear what other guests you get for the rest of your films. It was hard to pick, but for me, it was a very, I don't know if it's a personal reason. It's multitude of reasons. I have fond memories with Once Upon a Time in Mexico. I think I've rewatched this so many times, and it was the first film in the Mariachi series that I saw, actually. So I discovered the Mariachi trilogy franchise that Rodriguez had because of this one. I don't know why. I just saw it on the video. This was back like when video stores were still a thing, Blu-rays and DVDs. Right. And it was one day I was like, you know what? I'm renting this one today. So I rented it and I loved it. And I watched it like 8 times that weekend, and the music clicked. The film clicked for me. It was just fun. It was energetic. It was bombastic. It had an ensemble that I was like, hey, I recognize him. Him. And then the deeper thing, and I don't want to go too quick, but like this started my love of Robert Rodriguez, and that opened a lot more doors for me in the long run, which I can get into later. But like it kind of like was a crux for a lot of different things. But it holds a very special place for me. So when I saw this on the list, I was like, I really want to gush about this one and talk it with someone else who's seen it or has their own thoughts. Like, because it isn't one of his movies that is often brought up in conversation too often. So I was like, let's do it. Let's give it an excuse to talk about this movie. Hell yeah.
Because it's interesting because, like you say, this is not usually one that gets talked about too much with Robert Rodriguez, but I think it is like the most Robert Rodriguez movie ever. Like it's like such. All of his, like, all the things that you think of when you think of Robert Rodriguez movie, like this, like most movies will have like 2 or 3 of them. If there's like, let's say there's 5 things, this one has all 5, like whatever those might be. And yeah, I was the same way as you, where this is the first in that, Mexico trilogy of his that I came to. In fact, when I watched this movie, I didn't even realize that it was part of a trilogy. I was just like, oh, there's this badass movie. We're about the same age, so this came out when I was like in the early high school, or like I saw it in early high school. It came out like I maybe saw it like a year or two afterwards on like DVD or something. My best friend in high school was Mexican, and he was like, we got to watch this movie. This movie fucking rules. It's all about Mexico, and like it's because it is very much a love letter to Mexico. And I was like, wow, this thing is fucking awesome. Like this feels like this crazy neo-Western epic, even though it's like, in my mind, I remember it being like 3 hours, and it's like an hour 40. Like, because there's so much fucking happening with so many characters. You're like, oh yeah, this thing's got to be like this crazy epic, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's like an hour 41 or something like that. But no, it really is just this epic thing, and I actually hadn't gone back to it since then, I don't think, but I remember like loving it, and I was like, is this gonna hold up? Like, do I still like this movie as much as I did when I was like 14 years old? Yeah. And I hadn't actually seen either El Mariachi or Desperado. Mm-hmm. But I had read Robert Rodriguez's book, Rebel Without a Crew, which anyone who is like looking to get into film, I highly recommend.
Even, I will say, beyond just film, just anyone that's pursuing any type of entrepreneurial pursuit, it is very, like, I've listened to him talk about it. I've read it myself a little bit. And like so many of those things apply in any kind of creative ambition. Like, I just want to say that, don't, like, especially in film for sure, but like even beyond.
Yeah, it's a really great book, and it's an interesting, fun read too. And then it has like it's tacked on the script for El Mariachi, and which for people who don't know, Robert Rodriguez, like a lot of those guys of that filmmakers of that generation, was just like his first film was this incredibly indie thing. He self-financed it basically by doing a drug trial in, like, I think it was Austin. Like, met the guy who was like the bad guy in the movie who didn't even speak Spanish, was like, come down to Mexico, we're going to shoot this thing for super cheap. He originally wanted it to be like a straight-to-DVD movie, it released in Mexico, but some Hollywood execs loved it. They were like, we're going to like actually he only spent $7,000 on the movie, and that was mostly in terms of just like the film itself, and then it got blown. They spent more on like the marketing and blowing it up to 35 millimeter than on the actual movie itself. Desperado then gets it's still a small budget movie, but it's, you know, significantly larger than $7,000. Desperado's made for like 7 million, and this one's made for about 30. So still not a huge budget. It's in that zone I love, the mid-budget movies, where, you know, it kind of like you can see the progression, and it reminded me a lot of the Evil Dead trilogy with Sam Raimi, where he makes the first one. It's a true indie movie. He just kind of shoots with some buddies, like super on the download. Then it gets a lot more money to like make the follow up, which follows the first one. And then the third one is this much bigger thing with a bigger cast. It's an actual real large production. It's not as like this down and dirty indie, but it's still made with all those like indie tricks, right?
Yeah.
This feels like, oh yeah, this is like a big budget movie with indie sensibilities, that Robert Rodriguez like quick and dirty style. But he does it, and it's interesting this one because this is, I think, the first ever film shot with high def digital cameras, because it was right there at that point. So he didn't even have to spend the $7,000 that he would have had to shoot it with like actual film, because Rodriguez is like one of those guys who was at the forefront of digital filmmaking is becoming a thing. He's really good. He's with like George Lucas. George Lucas is like, hey, he calls all his friends like James Cameron and Rodriguez, and he's like, hey, I just shot Attack the Clones with digital cameras. This is the way of the future. Rodriguez zeroes in on that, and that's the reason we even get Sin City, the movie you could never make on traditional film. And that's why a lot of the reason why this film looks so incredibly crisp is it was the first movie to be shot with like HD cameras. But to get into like the guts of the movie itself, you know, this is a very, I've heard the term convoluted, but I prefer kind of just like winding story with a lot of these interesting characters and backstabs and plans within plans and stuff like that. What'd you think about the kind of crux of this movie?
I thought it was interesting because it kind of jumps straight into things, and it doesn't like the part that I didn't initially realize with this being part of a trilogy was because it felt like it was much more rooted on the Johnny Depp character, the Agent Sands. Yeah. And him kind of orchestrating things or navigating things, and Antonio Banderas' character being one of the protagonist type of hero piece of it, and then all the dirty underbelly side of it that are chasing him or mixed in with it. And I was like, okay, this is around Agent Sands' character and building around with him, and he isn't exactly like a good guy, but I'm curious where he's going to lead it. So I was like, this is a stand. As far again, I was the same kind of generation age as you, and I was like, oh, I rented it, and I had no preconceived notions as to what it was before going in. I was just like, okay, this could be a cool action film with an interesting story. And as I was navigating, I was like, oh, this is interesting. Oh, this is cool. I feel like they're alluding to something with this legendary Desperado character. I like it, and I was like, oh, I was intrigued, and like there was a cool mysticism around him that like, if you knew him, you were aware of his legend. If you didn't, you became aware of his legend just by his prowess and skills and his crazy moves and his the rest of his crew and stuff. And I was like, this is fun. Again, not a huge expectation in terms of like this larger than life symbolic story. It was just down in the ground, as you said, windy, multiple plots, so many characters kind of interweaving, and just a kind of bombastic film that I was like, oh, that was cool. That was just like a spectacle. That was more of a spectacle than anything else. Yeah. And it had like an element of in a time before we got like the Spider-Mans and the Pirates of the Caribbeans and the Superman, like just all these tentpole summer films. This was the type of film of like a Bad Boys or something where I was like, hey, big names, crazy action, wild set pieces, go, cool blockbuster. Right. Like I dug that about this. And like, I feel like to me, an element of it, like watching it now still holds up because it takes me back to that era of like how films are told and how films are like that spectacle is done in a different framing then, as opposed to now. I feel like there's an intention behind like we're gonna, and it does serialize it, but it does stand alone as well. Like there's so much hinging on like we have a John Wick and there's 15 John Wick films, which they're great, like no knocking it, but like that intention is there when they're making a series of films now. Whereas this, I kind of felt like it had it, but it didn't need it.
Yeah, it would, and it's interesting you mentioned John Wick because I feel like this would almost be like if they made like another John Wick movie and he was like a big part of it, but he wasn't the main character. Because yeah, like you say, like especially in the first half, it feels like Johnny Depp's CIA operative Sands is almost the main character, because he's definitely the one driving the plot forward, and El Mariachi, the character played by Banderas, is like almost just kind of like along for the ride. He does, I think, in the second half become more of a main character, but it is a true ensemble. And yeah, like if there was like a John Wick 5 and John Wick was there, but he was, and John Wick 4 has elements of that where a big part of it is Donnie Yen's story, but it's still a John Wick movie where this is like, oh no, there's a lot of dudes in this. And that was something the movie got dinged for when it came out, was like, oh yeah, this movie's really convoluted, and there's like, Aaron Mariachi is like not even the main character in his own captain to his own movie. And Rodriguez kind of came out and said, it was like, that's kind of the point. Like, he wanted to make this down and dirty film that was, he compared a lot to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Like how there's that Western trilogy where you have like the first two of the, this nameless badass character in the West, this nameless character played by Clint Eastwood, the man with no name, and then in the third one, there's all these characters, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and they're all kind of just like in this big vortex, and you have these characters that are very morally ambiguous, and I think that's Sands, is a really interesting character, and I think this is one of Johnny Depp's better roles for sure. Like, and it's interesting because this comes out like right after the first Pirates movie, and he hasn't fully gotten sucked into like his, like, I'm only going to be Jack Sparrow, because he's like, the more and more, like, I feel like the years go on and he plays Jack Sparrow more and more, all of his roles become that, where this is a really different role. This is a guy who is both very likable, but also you're like, this guy is a fucking scumbag asshole, like, who, and like the CIA does in real life, is trying to do a coup in a South American country. Yeah.
One of my favorite scenes, and it's a little bit of a speech he gives, is when he's talking about the puerco pible dish. He's like, this is the best dish. This is my favorite dish, and this is the best version of it. And I need to restore the balance by taking out the cook, because this is too good. And like, he goes into it, and it's almost like, I feel like in that scene, Robert Rodriguez, knowing he's good buddies with Tarantino, there was a Tarantino-ness to that scene of like,
oh yeah,
I want to milk it. I want to give you this like nice anecdote and this interesting story and how relate it back to things. I was like, I think scenes like that mixed in with the action and everything make me start to see the through lines of what makes Robert Rodriguez style his style. What I later learned to love was like things like Planet Terror and Sin City, as you mentioned. And I was like, okay, this guy's on my radar. I like this creator. I like this filmmaker. It all stems back to this film for me, because this was the basis of a lot of like the things I like. The when you were talking about the world that he creates and comparing it to John Wick, so much of what I think makes John Wick more iconic is how livable and how like real the ancillary characters are. Everyone feels like, oh, if we really want to, we can dig into that character, and there's a whole backstory. From characters as big as Donnie Yen to smaller characters that are just passing by. And I feel like you feel that care and that world building in a Once Upon a Time in Mexico, with all the cast that's there, the Mickey Rourke's, the Cheeches in the film, and so many other characters that I think, what's his name? I forget his name. William Dafoe and several others. Just so many named iconic like actors and non-famous actors. Just all kinds of people. The way they carry a presence in the film and the characters they embody, it's like, no, you have something about you that either you're gonna show in the film or we could learn if we ever want to. That's what I admire about Rodriguez and what he brings to these films. It's so good. But yeah, Agent Sands was such a fun a viewpoint from this for this film. I agree. I think it was a good call. And like with his point of it being, the point of it is like, it doesn't need him to be the main guy, El Mariachi. So I dug it.
Yeah, and I think you bring up something about like Rodriguez's style that is really accurate about how he is this very smart filmmaker, and he works really well with these actors. People like him. It's like, in the same way Tarantino came up at the same time as him, and they became good buddies. they have this kind of like down and dirty independent style, and he's able to make, as he talks about in his book, he made a movie for $7,000 and it looks like it's made for a couple $1,000,000.
Yeah.
And then this one, it's a movie that's made for $30,000 or sorry, $30 million, but it looks like $100 million movie, because his whole thing is like, hey, I want to use creativity rather than money, and when you have a good amount of money, that creativity is able to really stretch its legs. And I see, there's so many huge budget action movies. I think of, as impressive as it was, like the last Mission Impossible movie, that movie's budget was ridiculous and insane. So even though that movie made a good amount of money, significantly more than even with inflation this movie did, it probably didn't turn a profit, at least not compared to this one. Whereas this one, because you're able to make it smart, you're able to, make sure that every dollar is on the screen. You're able to use these cool tricks and get some actual really good looking action. I think that is a major benefit and something that studios could learn, instead of just being, because there's so much now where it's like, we're going to do this action scene. And sometimes Marvel and a couple other studios, they will shoot like action stuff before they even have like the plot ready. So it's like, okay, how do we fit this action in? Whereas this, Rodriguez also writes all of his movies. And I love that in the opening credits, it's like a flick by Robert Rodriguez, and it's like cut and whatever by Rodriguez. It's all made with an intention that is becoming rarer and rarer,
There's a resourcefulness that you admire, like you're saying, like they're trying to do more with less, and there's a creativity that requires out of you, both creatively in terms of like how you're doing it, execute. Like the creativity isn't just in the film itself, in what you as the viewer admiring, but the creativity is also in the craft of it. Like he finagles ways, like how can I do more with less cameras? How can I do these film tricks to get the same effect? And I recently, it was earlier this year, he did a talk on Lex Friedman's podcast. It was like an 3-hour conversation. And he was talking about all the things they did, I think From Dusk Till Dawn show where he was like producing.
Yeah.
And he helped on one of the episodes. He's like, I'm going to show you just the types of editing tricks we did to get this shot to work within a day. And he like goes through this long like explanation of like, okay, we shot this, we shot that. And it was like a way to like show that he threw bullets in the air and he caught them, and how they were able to do that using one or two takes, but from 3 different cameras to get the effect he needed within one day, instead of having to do a bunch of CG and all this extra stuff. They're like, no, if you just play off of sound and do this, the viewer will cognitively think, oh, that sound triggers mean this, the bullets went into the thing, even though they're not even near it at all. And so I'm like, that level of like explanation and understanding of like how his mind is working and how he's going through it, I'm like, oh man, like you are well and above what I like ever thought like people could be in this space, and how much you are invested. I think he now has afforded himself the opportunity to take a step back and be more at a higher level view, but he loves getting down and dirty in the middle of it with everyone else in the crew. And like comparing it a little bit to games, I feel like there's something that you can really see in that craft of like, there are big budget games that are just big budget for the sake of like, hey, we are an Activision game, or we are an EA game, or this big studio game. Let's put the biggest effects, let's put the biggest spectacles, the biggest whatever CG. And it's like, yeah, but if you're not doing it with any intention, what is all that affording you? Like, you're leaning too hard on that, depending too hard on that, where you'll see other games where they are like, we're doing creative decisions to make up for the fact that we're not doing a bigger budget kind of visual effect. And what you're really seeing is able to enjoy is you're still able to enjoy the game and the experience that you're getting in the creative outlet we are creating. So I'm like, some of what he does here, I've been admiring, but from outside of just filmmaking, I'm like, there's a lot to admire about that in creative ventures that we all pursue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you talk about like his later career, and we talked about his earlier career. And this is an interesting midpoint, because I think it's why it really hits the sweet spot for me for Rodriguez, because I think obviously like watching El Mariachi, you're like, this is really good this is incredible for a movie made for $7,000, but you're also just like, it's pretty clearly a movie that was made very cheaply. The actors in it are not necessarily professionals. Like, no disrespect to the guy who played El Mariachi, but major upgrade. Let's get Antonio Banderas in here. Like, that's a good call. And in some not all of his films, but some of his later films, you're like, he just shot this shit in his backyard. He's like, hey, Ben Affleck owes me a favor. Come over. We're just gonna like do this shit. This is like that perfect middle ground of like, I have some money, like a vision, and I'm gonna like really put myself into that, where he's really starting to get the creative freedoms, but he can't like take as many shortcuts that he would take later in his career. So this is absolutely, I think this honestly is probably my favorite Rodriguez film.
Really?
Like I said, he's made some other really good ones. Alita Battle Angel I think is super underrated. I might like Sin City more. I think that I think Sin City is my favorite Robert Rodriguez film, but this is definitely up there. And I was gonna say this is my first one, but I was like, no, I saw Spy Kids before this. I was like, I forgot. Like, Spy Kids when it came out.
He's got range. Yeah, for me, it's a tie between this and Planet Terror.
Nice.
The Grindhouse film was one of the experience the duo of Planet Terror and what was the other one? Tarantino's
Tarantino one, yeah. With what's his name? It's got
Kurt Russell
in it. Yeah.
Death Proof. Planet Terror and Death Proof.
Yes,
that pairing, that was one of the wildest, most memorable theater going experiences for me. I loved it so much. But yeah, Planet Terror was just like, in a similar way, like this is an ode to that campy kind of Shaft, kind of like over the top action film kind of vibe. But in this space, in this culture, Mexican culture, I'm like. Yeah. I love Planet Terror for being kind of like an ode to the Grindhouse type of film and an homage to those stuff in its own campiness and its own fun, but like with this, it's like it's campy, but it's also like there's a realness to it that he brings. Like the characters are all very sincere and like just engrossed in it. That you're like, you know what, I believe it too, even though it's over the top. I'm in. So I'm all in. So
yeah, 100%.
He does a good job of like getting that out of me. I've learned.
Right, it's definitely like a heightened reality. In the same way, once again, keep going back to John Wick, but it's in the same way that John Wick movies are like heightened realities. It's like, yeah, this is like a world where there's like Cheech Marin keeps like the secret thing in his eye, and like there's like secret stashes of like guns within guitar cases, and all this insane stuff is happening. But it's still grounded enough that you can still buy into all of the characters. It's not complete insane fantasy and stuff like that. People will like hang off of cars, and I love one of my favorite stunts in the movie is when him and Selma Hayek are like descending the building and they're handcuffed together and kind of have to keep doing the swings. Like that's over the top, but it's still real enough that you feel like, oh, they're in danger at any point and like something crazy could happen to them. So I really love that once again, it's a sweet spot that Rodriguez really hits here.
Speaking of sweet spots, there's a song in this film that has like been one of my all-time favorite songs that I put in any type of hyping myself soundtrack. It's Pistolero.
Okay.
That song, I think it's by June Reactor. That song gets me like amped up all the time, and it came from this movie. And so every time I listen to it, I'm like, oh, let's go. Like that, Mortal Kombat, and a few other like just high octane songs. It just has an energy to it that I love, and I'm like, the whole soundtrack is fantastic. Like. I love the folklore, legend of this character while also kind of being a modern blockbuster in its own right. So, but I have one quick question for you.
Yeah.
He's done original IP, new films here and there, adaptations. He's returned to the Spy Kids franchise quite a bit. Would you want him to return to this franchise in any way? And if so, talk to me about like what's in your head about that.
Right, because it's like I'm like, oh man, I kind of love a trilogy,
Yeah,
and it's so good, but like, yeah, like because Antonio Banderas, he's like, obviously 22 years older now than when he made this movie. He was obviously even younger when he made the first one in '95. So it would have to be kind of like an old man El Mariachi, So I would be down for it, like do it like. And this is a movie that I liked a lot, that I know was mixed reviews, but like a Dial of Destiny, where it's like, okay, here's Indiana Jones, but I guess how old is Antonio? Because like he's not that much older than like Tom Cruise and stuff, I guess. So he could, and Tom Cruise is still out there hanging. Yeah, he's 65. So, and honestly, oh, forgot he was even in Dial of Destiny. I kind of forgot about that.
He's also in one of the Expendables films, so he's
Right,
still got
yeah. Yeah. So you know what? Yeah, bring him back, and I know this is slightly off topic, but the one that I want to see him come back for is I want to see him come back as Zorro, right? I want to see, because that was my fucking shit back in the day, was Zorro, and I want to see him be basically the Anthony Hopkins character, but for like the next generation, right?
So I was thinking that idea, but for this, I was like, let's take that same premise, because I love Mask of Zorro as well. That was also my shit, and I'm like, oh, I love that they started the movie with Anthony Hopkins as the thing, and then he becomes the mentor for the next gen. It's almost like the Batman Beyond in some ways. But
yeah.
I would love to see an older El Mariachi, and there's some young scruffy kid. And he ends up and he plays the guitar, and like an homage of like the legend of this entity that exists in this world and passing it on. I'm like, I don't know. It's not. It's cheesy, but like done right and done in Rodriguez's hands. I'm like, yeah, I'm sold. I'm in.
Yeah, well, because he's had such an interesting progression, the El Mariachi character. Because obviously in this one, he's like the ultimate badass. Like he can kill 1,000 guys, and he's like this fucking legend, and he's like crawling up walls like Spider-Man and shit. And then, you go back one before this, and he's still like a total badass, but like maybe a little bit less. He's just like a really great assassin. And in the first one, he's some dude. He's literally like a guy that gets a mistaken identity for like a drug dealer and starts killing people and just like really good at it. So it's been crazy to see his arc from just like, hey, I'm just a traveling mariachi player, to like, I'm fucking saving the president of Mexico and like stopping these coups and like, working with the fucking CIA operatives and shit like that. So yeah, I would like to see where his story ultimately goes. Do you have him like, be this mentor character, and maybe like have them, just spoilers for John Wick 4, maybe have, the fourth one be kind of his last chapter or something like that. I would be down for that.
Yeah. I'd be curious.
Yeah.
I was very curious about that.
Yeah. And well, talking about, because we talked a lot about, how this movie is obviously set in Mexico and how Robert Rodriguez is a Mexican director, especially for this time. I think that it was really refreshing to see a take on Mexico that was not only a lot more positive, where like, okay, there is like the Mexican bad guy, but there's also like the president, who's like just like this shining example of like democracy and stuff that we don't even get like now, like presidents in American movies or in real life. Like he's just like, this ideal of what we want to do. And like, there's that whole ending where he's like, who are you guys? He's like, we're proud Mexicans. And they have this great moment. And a lot of movies from this time, it's like, even, years after that, Mexico was just like portrayed as like these drug dealers and like, bad guys coming up, and it was just shot with like this yellow filter. And so it was really refreshing for me to see this take on it, and to have, even though I will say, obviously Willem Dafoe and brown face, it's a little bit weird. It's a little jarring.
It was very weird, yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but when I found out that Antonio Banderas was not Mexican, that he was Spanish, I was like, what? I was like, he's Zorro. He's El Mariachi. Like, so that's a little weird. Right? I was like, what? But still, it was really cool to see Rodriguez kind of writing this love letter to his country. What did you think about all that stuff?
Really dug it, because for me, again, like when I was watching the DVD at that time, I was eating every DVD rental. I was like, if they had special features, I was deep diving into it. And Rodriguez loves special features, so I was like behind the scenes, extras, commentary, and then part of it, again, going back to the dish that Agent Sands orders, the slow roasted pork. He was talking about like what that dish is, what it means to him as for Rodriguez himself, why he likes it, and mixing in the music and just mixing in the culture. So much, like you said, is a celebration of like, oh, this is me, and this is my roots and my heritage and my culture, and I want to do a cool version of these other films I've seen, but in this tone, in this space, with these characters that I want to like build out to this world. And so like, I felt every bit of that, and I was like, I love that. I like, kind of like what we were talking about in our Kingdom of Heaven episode. It was so refreshing to see a culture that you so often see depicted a certain way, not in that way, not in that negative, like stigmatic tone that they always get treated. Like for me, it was like the Middle Eastern. You're always like, oh, it's just the dirty Middle Easterns in this film as the enemies or whatever. But they gave them like, no, they're logical. They're the ones coming with some rationale. Here, seeing so many characters that are more nuanced and like really painting a lot of the bad guys as these like American like or just various agencies just operating in just dirty ways and less so the people of the country. I was like, hell yeah, like this is like at that point I don't think I was consciously aware of that, but I was picking up on like this is just such a more sincere and just like you can sense the love being put into it.
Right, because like none of this plot would happen if it wasn't for, you know, the CIA just being like, hey, we're gonna fuck around in Latin America again, which, like I said, a very real thing. You know, look up the term, anybody who's listening, banana republics, that exists because the CIA was toppling democracies and shit like that. And I love that moment. I don't know about you, when it's that first meeting between Johnny Depp and Cheech, and he's like, hey, you know, why didn't you we offered you $500 or $50,000. Why are you only taking 10? He's like, we can live with 10, because he's basically saying, I know you are about to shoot me for this amount of money, but I'm asking for only a fifth of it, so you'll let me go. And then he like takes his arm off, and you're like, oh, cool, he was about to shoot me. And then there's like a moment later where you have like the advisor guy who's like betrayed, and he's like spits out something, and it's like implied that he just got poisoned. It's like every fucking time, you know, like I love the way that it's like, yeah, even though this is like a movie where this corrupt Mexican guy and he's fighting these other Mexican guys, it's all because of the machinations of this one fucking white prick. You know, I thought that was great.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
Yeah, man. But yeah, any like other stray thoughts or anything you wanted to touch on with Once Upon a Time in Mexico here?
For me, I don't know. It just takes me back to, yeah, like I said, like where I started with loving this film, but more so like learning about who Robert Rodriguez was, and he's been a big inspiration for me. And that's kind of like where I now have a new admiration for this film of like, man, I'm so glad I picked that up and like watched it when I did, because if it wasn't for that, it wouldn't have sent me onto these other films. If they didn't get into that, I wouldn't have got into, like, I was okay liking the weirder, in a vein of this podcast, like you're appreciating films that are underrated, like they're not admired at the global critically acclaimed scale, but there's a nugget in it that just speaks to you. And he, as a director, spoke to me with this and has taught me to like be more in tune with that. Don't like look for that in other films. And then beyond that, I was like, just with creative endeavors, like I said, the Lex Friedman podcast he was on really directly spoke to that, beyond the book that you were also mentioning, of like how to be resourceful, how to be creative in a world where like people have way more than you, but you can, like, if you persevere, if you let yourself become this conduit of creativity, whatever you're doing, do it. And like he talked, like there's one thing and it's not directly on Once Upon a Time, but it's more about him, kind of, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
He did, I think, was it Four Rooms was one of the films on his...
Oh, yeah, he's like one of the 4 directors in that. It's like him, Tarantino, and I think a couple other guys, yeah.
But he said, like, if it wasn't for that film and it being considered... It's critically considered like a failure, but it led him to work with folks like Antonio and other directors, and it gave him the space to then make those successes. So he's like, don't look at these failures as failures, and look at them as stepping stones towards your next success. And it was very much that for him to go directly into Desperado and to go in, or sorry, Desperado and Spy Kids and other films like that. And I'm like, just so much of like how you reframe failures and how you pursue creative stuff. I was just like, man, I love you. You're already cool, and I love your movies, but now I just love you even more as a person. So
that's awesome. That's rad.
This film kind of is like my starting point for all that. And so
very nice.
For all those reasons, I really resonate with it. And it's a good, I stand by it. It's such a good film. It's such a good flick. Easy to turn on. Music's fantastic. Great cast. What's not to like about it? Yeah,
I'm definitely, because I have my playlist that where if there is like an important song from a movie, I put it on like the underrated. Look it up, anybody who's listening, the underrated movie podcast playlist. And so it's filled with all these bangers from all these movies I've covered. And yeah, you can bet that there's going to be at least a track or two from Once Upon a Time in Mexico showing up on that. Yeah.
Pistolero. I'm telling you, if you haven't
Pistolero.
listened to it,
Going on there.
you should check that out and tell me what you think.
All right, I will definitely check that out. It's gonna be on the playlist as soon as this episode drops, so go and listen to it, people. I'll put a link in the description. But yeah, I always like to, as you know, end these podcasts with asking a question that is tangentially related to, you know, the movie, but not necessarily about it. And since we talked a lot about how this is kind of the end of this trilogy, this kind of epic conclusion, do you have any other favorite endings of a trilogy? I think I might know where you're going here, but I would love to hear what your favorite ending of a trilogy is.
Of a trilogy.
Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
Dang, you just sideswiped me with that one. Okay. There's an easy answer, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm right. Oh, dang it. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna go with the very just. I'm gonna be honest with myself. It never gets old, and I always I watch it almost annually. And we've talked about, I think, extended cuts and director's cuts before, but like Lord of the Rings, Return of the King is not my favorite film of the three, but the journey they go on and the culmination of not it's a very just simple thing of like hope and perseverance and camaraderie and seeing that work, like, and the farewells and like, you know, things coming to a close and saying goodbyes. That closure to me was just, it always like puts a nice bow on things and closes a book on it, and I'm like, it always gets me. That's probably like my easy answer. Yeah, I'm sure if I think a little bit more, there's a couple of things that'll come up, but that one, it comes most immediately to my mind.
I mean, I think, that's what I was thinking too. I was like, that's gotta be, you know, I feel like that's the, you know, kind of really easy answer. And it's easy because it's a good answer, right? It's like, it's an answer for a rightful way. Yeah. I think it's not my favorite of the three, but it's still so good, and it's such an incredible ending. All of these characters, you know, you've been on this huge journey with them, so that's an incredible one. I'll throw out a couple others that were, interestingly enough, I think that they've had more movies made, but I think that those still serve as like a cap to the trilogy. And I would say Toy Story 3 is kind of a perfect end for that trilogy. And then one of my favorite movies of all time is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. You know, I talk about how I do actually like the next two Indiana Jones movies a lot, but like as far as those movies, those original three, that's a perfect ending for a trilogy. You know, riding off into the sunset and everything. It's great to see Indy. And I even like Spider-Man 3 a lot. I think Spider-Man 3 is super underrated. I've covered it on here before, so I wanted to shout that one out. But yeah, I don't know.
I would say the one that I'm like, I don't know if it's. Would you count the Cornetto trilogy as a storybook trilogy?
You know what? We can count it. Yeah. So The World's End are we saying that one?
I think there's something there, but the one I was gonna, here's the thing I'll say. I'm not changing my answer, but the one I'm most interested in chasing, because I've heard such good things about, is the Before trilogy. Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, Before Midnight. I've heard amazing things about those films, and it's like a omission in my film catalog that I'm like, I feel like that, based on what the premise of it is and how it's shot and done, I feel like there's something right there for like, this could take a mantle. But yeah, Lord of the Rings, that's my answer.
Yeah. I mean, I love the Before movies. Midnight, which is the third one, is probably my least favorite.
Okay.
I think the middle one is definitely the best one, before Sunset. That one's my favorite one. But they're all great movies, and I'm usually not a big Richard Linklater fan, but I really like those. And then one more I'll throw out too is, and this is another one where they eventually made other movies, but this is definitely a trilogy, is the Planet of the Apes reboot. Like, I think War for the Planet of the Apes fucking rule. I just rewatched that movie recently, and it's another one. I think the second one's better, but like, God, that's a great ending. Like Caesar is one of my all-time favorite movie characters. Like, he's so fun. And Andy Serkis in that is just like how did he not win the Oscars? I know because it's mocap and the Oscars don't have respect for that, but like, holy fucking shit. So yeah, I mean, just wanted to talk about final entries for trilogies, because that's what this is, and I think those are some good ones for sure. Got some good ones that we talked about here. But yeah, man, this was super fun. Thank you again so much for being on. I always love getting you on all of my podcasts, especially the flagship here, Underrated. I was like, it has been too long since I had Kurosh on. Have to have you back. One more time, please let the people know out there where they can find you and all the stuff for you.
Well, thank you for having me on the podcast. It's always a pleasure. I'm always happy to be here and excited to just nerd out about films with you. If you want to find anything I'm working on or doing, you can find me on all kind of podcasting platforms for @SavePointStories. And you can find me and my YouTube channel @CujoPrime. So at youtube.com/@CujoPrime. All my socials @CujoPrime. And that's with a K, Kujo Prime.
Very nice.
So yeah, you can find me everywhere. Again, I'm celebrating and elevating video games and game developers. So that's like my thing. I love games. I love the people that make games and give me the things that I love, in the same way that you are celebrating and elevating films and in the spaces that, you know, they're underrated, and all the different other variations of that. I think you do a commendable job doing that. I've both been on your panels and seen your panels. They're fantastic. We've been kind of going up along the convention circuits together in a way, and I'm very proud of that. And I'm very kind of like, I call ourselves like a class of panelist moderators. So we're like Rodriguez and Tarantino coming up together. You know, I'm not gonna knock that comparison, but do I get to who's who?
I don't know. It depends on which one of us likes feet more, I guess. Like,
fair, touche. That's a good point. We'll have to talk that off.
Yeah, I'll be off mic. It'll be another discussion. That's on the Patreon.
Yeah, there you go. Leave it for the Patreon subs. But yeah, always a pleasure. Always love your stuff. So
thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And anybody out there, if you know this is your first time listening, definitely check out, like I mentioned, my Patreon. There's all kinds of stuff on there. underratedmoviepodcast.com to check out the list of all my stuff. Patreon.com/underratedmoviepodcast. I do another podcast with my buddy Damien called Midnight Film Society. I just wrapped up my bonus podcast on Patreon talking about 2D films that were released in 3D that then you got to see them in 2D. You were on an episode talking about Avatar over there. That was a lot of fun. I am also talking about Marvel stuff. There's a bunch of stuff coming up, including some bonus episodes I'm doing for that. That is ramping up over the summer with all the new Marvel releases. I'm going to be talking about Marvel Zombies in a second here, and then some bonus stuff, talking about X-Men, Spider-Man, the old ones. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So check that stuff all out, give this show a like, give it a follow, give it 5 stars, whatever you want to do. I really appreciate it. But I will see you guys all next week or next time.
Bye.